Hey folks, we are in week 3 of Vocab for AP Lit, and this week we are going to be talking about point of view. Now, I think most of the terms this week are going to be pretty much review for you, but I want you to think about a couple of things. Not only should you be able to identify point of view in a story, but I want you to think about, more importantly, why the author chose to write in that point of view. How would the text be different? How would it change if he or she had chosen a different point of view? So kind of a question to keep in mind going forward is identification is certainly the first step, but then the question of why. Okay. So let me screen share with you. And there we go. So let's start talking about point of view. First things first, let's just define point of view. So point of view is simply the perspective from which the story is told. The perspective from which the story is told. And I particularly like this graphic because it's all about perspective, right? The guy who is on the island is excited to see the boat, and the guy who is in the boat is excited to see land. So really all about perspective, the angle that you're looking at things from. Now, I put this little graphic here kind of as just a helpful reminder and a helpful cheat sheet. If we have a story that's told in first-person point of view, going across in the row, those are some of the pronouns that would be used to help us signal, like, reminder that this is written in first person. In second person, that's using the word you, your, yours. And then in third person, he, she, it, they, them, their, etc. So you may want to come back to this or jot some of these down in the first person, second person, and third person boxes to help you. First person point of view is probably the one we are most familiar with. When something's written in first person point of view, we have a character in the story who is telling us the story. Again, our narrator is a character in the story. Often that is the protagonist in the story, not always. There's very few times I'm going to use the word always, but often that's the case. If you have a first-person narrator, there's actually a really important question that you need to think about, because you are getting the story told from a character who's involved in it. And sometimes when you have that happen, right, there's things as an outsider that you can see that a character who's involved in a situation can't. And that question then for you is whether or not the narrator is reliable or unreliable. Okay, when we're talking about a first-person narrator, you have to determine if the narrator is reliable or unreliable. So a reliable narrator is no different than, reliable person in your life. Somebody that you can trust, somebody either that has proven themselves to you or that has not given you any reason to distrust him or her. Unreliable narrator then is a narrator whose credibility is somehow compromised. And that could be for a number of reasons. That narrator might have a bias. I think of Huck Finn being racist. We could consider that a bias. A character who has somewhat of a limited perspective, either due to age, due to being naive, due to complete ignorance. We could talk about characters for unreliable narrators who are simply immature, who are mentally ill, who are known to be liars. Makes me think about Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye. Another example I think about is the kid's example of the boy who cried wolf, right? We can trust him a couple of times. We can, that old saying, burn me once, shame on you, burn me twice, shame on me kind of thing. And so when the boy cries wolf too many times, we no longer trust him. And so again, first person narrator, you have to decide if that narrator is reliable or not so much. Second person point of view, this is a really fun one, but it's also one that's not used very often. Couple things to think of when you think of second person point of view. You have events related as they happen to the reader. It's meant to draw you into the story, and it uses the word you. The most common example that I can think of in literature is choose your own adventure books. I loved these as a kid. I don't know if you read them or not, but you sort of jump into the story and you're reading, and then literally you as the reader have to make a decision, and then based on that you go to certain pages. Here on your screen I put a cover of one, and then I put part of a page of one there so you can see what that looks like. Another thing that is written in second person point of view are directions. So if you look at the directions of any box of something you're making, like in the kitchen, your brownie mix, it's written in second person. It might say something like, open the box and pour the brownie mix into a bowl, right? It's what we call an implied you. So it doesn't say you pour the brownie mix into the bowl. It says pour the brownie mix. It's implied that you would do it. Those are two really common examples of second person point of view. Now, third person point of view is an umbrella term. I'm going to talk more specifics. Anytime that we have a story written in third person point of view, it's being told from the perspective of a character who is outside of the story. So he or she is not involved in the action of the story itself. So more specific third person points of view is what we're going to talk about next that fit under our umbrella. The first one is third person limited point of view. The word limited really should help you remember this one. And simply the narrator, their knowledge is limited to one character. So if I'm an outside narrator, I can observe what everybody's doing, right? Actions. I can make some assumptions or educated guesses based on how you interact with other people. But my knowledge, my insider knowledge is limited to one character. So I can tell you what one character is thinking and feeling, but not the other characters, okay? Next up is third person omniscient point of view. So I have a picture of the heavens on here because I always think of omniscient narrators as kind of the God-like narrators. He or she can do whatever they want to do. They're all knowing. So I can, as an omniscient narrator, I can observe. I can tell you the thoughts of character A, and then I can tell you the thoughts of character B and character F. And then I can observe some more. So I have the ability to tell you, thoughts and feelings of all characters. It doesn't mean I have to exercise that right. So meaning if there's 20 characters in your story and your narrator only tells you the thoughts and feelings of 2 characters, still an omniscient narrator, because we're talking about more than one. Okay, I can reveal the thoughts and feelings of more than one. So omniscient narrator or God-like narrator. Third person objective point of view. And anytime we see an objective point of view, we're talking about a narrator that's really detached. So they're telling you what happens, and they can't tell you anything more than can be inferred from action or dialogue. So an objective narrator here cannot read thoughts and feelings of characters. Okay? They can only make inferences based on action or dialogue. The story of the lottery is told in a third person objective point of view. You only get the actions and the dialogue of the characters. You never know what Tessie Hutchinson is thinking. If you did, think about how that would change the story. The whole crux of the story, the idea of what the lottery is, would be revealed a lot earlier on, because she would probably be thinking something like, I don't want to die today, right? Or I hope somebody in my family doesn't die today. So that's a really good example of why point of view can be so important, because for instance in a story like that where it's based on that idea of suspense and it draws out this idea, it would completely change how we understand and see that story, and you would no longer have that idea of suspense. Now there's just 2 more left, and one of them is innocent eye. And innocent I always has to be paired with one of the point of views that I've talked about previously. So innocent I, but first person. Innocent I and third person omniscient, or innocent I and plus whatever. But when you have an innocent I narrator, you have the perspective of a child, right? Kids offer such a unique perspective on things. They are naive, they're often blunt, right? They just say what they think. And I'm going to tell you a story in just a minute, but often people will say, well, how do I know if it's an innocent I? Like, what's the magic age? And there is no magic age, folks. If they have the understanding of an adult, they're understanding really adult matters, or then it's no longer innocent I. You would even have an adult narrator where you have innocent I point of view. For instance, if they're adult in age, but they have some sort of a mental disability where it still makes their mind very childlike, you can still consider that innocent I point of view. Innocent I always reminds me of my daughter, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. When she was 3, we were walking through the mall one afternoon, and I was holding her hand, and I don't know what we were talking about, and approaching us, and going to just pass by in the mall was an older couple, and the woman was walking kind of with a cane, and her husband was beside her, and as they get closer, my daughter looks at me and says, loudly enough for them to hear, "Mom, that lady is a pirate." Well, from her perspective, that absolutely made sense because the woman was wearing an eye patch. And, that's such a really good example of innocent I point of view. Of course, as an adult, I wanted to crawl in a hole and die. But that's her world, and that's something that she knows and understands. And so in a case like that, really straightforward kind of example of how innocent I could work. Finally, we have flashback or selective recollection, or sometimes called selective recall. So flashback simply when a character returns in memory to a time previous to the current. Again, flashback, returning in your memory to a time previous to the current. This makes me think about the story The Scarlet Ibis from your freshman year. In the very beginning of the story, there's 2 paragraphs that indicate that the narrator is an adult, but then it flashes back to the time when he was with his brother Doodle and all the things that he had to go through. And there's moments where it sort of returns to the present, and there's sort of an adult reflection on something that happened as a child, but it really kind of flashes back to all these memories that the narrator went through with his brother Doodle. That brings us to the end of point of view for the week. As per usual, I will address questions on Tuesday, and I hope you enjoyed another vocab video.